Am I saying that right? Marana, Arizona was located. I did want to ask that question.
Yeah, it's just north of Tucson.
Okay, got it.
Yeah. So
And
people
then,
say Tucson. My zip code is actually Tucson, but I'm probably on, like a borderline between Tucson and Marana.
okay, got it. Because your campaign results were really unique, and I'm going to cover those with you right now, so
Oh,
we can get a feel for it. One thing I in front of me that I am curious is I wonder how many. Do you remember how many records were on this list to start that you sent over? I can get that
mm,
answer from my team. I was just wondering if you knew. Let me ask them real quick. See if we can get an answer before this meeting ends. How many records did Lisa Boys have on the phones? Okay, cool. So ISM, so we should know more soon. And that just helps me get a feel for the stats. Okay.
okay.
Because week one was very explosive, right?
Yeah. Hmm.
Very explosive, which is why I want to see how many records were on there. Because if there was only 1,000 or 500, it would make sense for the dip because it means that these are redials.
Yeah,
Something.
no, it's not that though. I mean, it was probably several thousand that I sent over. So I sent more than I signed up to have dialed. Let me say it that way.
Gotcha. Gotcha. I
And we
got
just
something
picked the
ringing.
top of the list.
Okay. I'm sorry. Someone's calling me on a different line. I just got to close that real quick. Um, okay. So I'm sorry. What were you saying about how many records were on it?
It was definitely more than
A
a
thousand.
couple thousand. So I
Okay.
mean it was a
Okay.
lot. Yeah.
Got it.
We
Got
just
it. So
picked the top of the list. We sorted and said, hey, well, let's just start with the top of the list and see how it goes.
gotcha. Okay. And that's why I like to ask, and then I'll find out some more information. And so the way the campaign went, like I said, was very interesting. We actually spoke to a ton of people. This was probably our highest performing campaign as far as it relates to contact rate. So you see, we did 2,000 dials, and we actually spoke to 353 people, which that's a ton. Okay, a good
Okay.
a good rule of thumb is 10% is good. So 200 conversations would have been great. Okay. But we did 153 more than that. So we had a 17.65% contact rate, really high. Okay. So we spoke
Hmm.
to a shitload of people. So that's number one. And that's a great sign. But and even 9 leads isn't bad by any means, but considering how many people we spoke to, 9 leads starts to look low. Does that make sense? If we spoke
Yeah.
to 200 people and got 9, that's one thing, but we almost spoke to 400 people and got 9. Okay.
Yeah.
The other good piece of data is only 27 people told us that we had the wrong number. Okay. Which that's also really good. That means that we spoke to
Okay.
92% of the people we spoke to actually owned the property that we were calling about.
Okay.
So huge. So wherever you got this list from and whoever skip traced it, I commend those decisions. Okay. Because all that data was good. Okay.
So I skip traced it, and that was one of the questions I have for you
Okay.
because I can't, it's hard to tell, like, well, maybe my list is really bad, or like it's hard to tell that unless you're in, the CRM that you guys have. So
Right.
that was one of the things was like, well, maybe my list is bad. I'm not getting the right rate. So this is really good information for me because I spent obviously a ton of time skip
Doing
tracing
this.
and it's a little painful to do when you're doing it by hand. So
Yeah.
that was something I wanted to talk about, your skip tracing versus my skip tracing. And is it worth, time wise for me to have you guys do it and have a better success rate or not?
Yeah. So now you did all this manually? Is that what you're saying right now?
Yeah,
Or
I use, Google Fast People Search, True Search, all
wow,
that stuff. So I
wow,
did
good
a
for
ton of
you. Good for you. So you really putting the legwork on this. So I'll explain to you what my stats would look like if I skip traced it. Okay.
them. Okay.
Your contact rate, now that's variable on the area. There's a chance that the contact rate would be anywhere from 12 to where it is now. Okay. Is what I probably would say. That's number one. Number two, the accuracy rate does average between 80 and 95% on mine as well. So you'd probably see pretty similar numbers and save a lot of time.
Okay. Good.
And that's just based off the other campaigns that I see. And then if we did it, and let's say the contact rate drops to, I know the accuracy rate will be good because that's always good, but let's say the contact rate drops to 8%, then we would know, hey, whatever you were doing before is better. I don't think that would happen. Um,
Right.
but if we analyzed it and saw that, we would at least learn more from the data, right? Um,
Yeah.
in that. But yeah, so I feel I'm pretty confident that if you did it through us, we could save you time and money and get very close to similar results as well.
Right.
Um, but this, just so you know, you did not do this in vain. I mean, this is awesome. Now, here's what we do learn about the list that's less obvious. Okay, maybe when you said, my list, and this isn't bad. Nothing is bad, but the only thing is, what kind of list was it? Does it meet enough distress criteria? So that's what I would look at. Contact rate, awesome. Accuracy rate, awesome. Now, the people we spoke to did not have a high desire to sell, which means one of two things. Either the type of list it wasn't close enough to an eager person. For example, if it was owner occupieds are very low common selling because they're like, well, where the hell am I going to go? Okay. So just, for an example. And
Right.
then if it, and then you have super distress lists, which are, which generally do well. So the other thing to look at would be what kind of list was it? And then is the market saturated? It doesn't look like the market's that saturated because we had a high contact rate. Normally in saturated markets, it will be a low contact rate because everyone's getting bombarded by other people too. You know. So what do you know what kind of list this was that you sent?
It was certain areas in which I was interested. So that's what it was.
Gotcha. And then do you know if it was absentee owners or if it was owner occupied or if it was
No, I didn't narrow it down by owner occupieds or absentees.
okay,
It was
it's
just
just
simply
general.
areas I was looking in because I figured I wanted to get something over that I already had done the
Yeah,
skip tracing and everything. And so
right.
maybe the next list is something that I pull differently, or I have you guys pull it differently. And that's something I wanted to talk about too, is how you get your data, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so with our data, we use some of the biggest ones in the nation too. Just so you know, one of them is called CoreLogic. They're awesome for
Yeah.
houses. That's the one that I like to use. And what I would suggest would be, and your current list might even have this subsegmented, but maybe a focus on absentees on the next one specifically is what I would do. Because I feel like if we had this kind of, since this is a mixed list, 9 might make sense with the 18% because there's a chance there could be some owner occupieds in there. There's a chance. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
it doesn't mean that there isn't. I'll actually ask my team now about the list and to see if they can give me an answer. Because sometimes we can tell just by looking at it also what kind of record it is too. So I'll do that research well, but maybe making that pivot um, could be the game changer for us on the next. How did the 9 calls go of the 9 leads that you did get? How'd those turn out?
Well, none of them were people who were ready to sell. So a couple of them actually were, these people that are in the, you know, over 1 million market. And they were like, yeah, I'll sell, have you got $2 million? I mean, kind of a thing. And those are always annoying to me, but I feel
Right.
like, they weren't quite ready to sell because they were, it was a $1.2 million
Tire
house, and it was
kicking.
like sort of they were being a little flippant. And I was like, well, how many bedrooms do you have? How many this or that? Because I work with both investors and consumers, I say, the
Right.
people who are going to live in the house, but also investors. So the more bedrooms you have, the more you can cash flow it and so forth and so on. So maybe
Yeah.
you can get that number. But, once you get people down that, then they go, oh, well, I'd have to talk to my wife and I'm not really sure. And then there were some that were like a couple of them turned out to be investors who I'm gonna have to wait on them because they're kind of in that, hey, I've got a 12% loan on this. They were wanting to flip it, and now they probably are not gonna flip it, but they gotta
Mm,
wait until that loan gets called due. So there's some people getting trapped in that quandary, right?
right.
So
Right.
so I didn't get any leads like immediate, like let's go do it right
Super
now.
viable.
But I
Yeah.
had a couple good conversations, and I'd say, in the next year, if two of them come through, that's great, but nothing that I could sell right now.
Gotcha. Gotcha. And and yeah, I do think that with some added, you know, some added criteria. The other thing that we like to do, and this is like another unique lesson, is whenever we do pull a list, and you could add this to your notes, is you always want to put a max property value in there. What I've learned
Hmm.
with a lot of these list pulling softwares, when you pull stuff, like they include all the rich people first for some reason, you know? Um,
Uh,
and so one thing we like to do is like and I don't care what the cap is, but it's always good to cap it so you don't get any real $1 million stragglers or stuff like that. I mean, I know in like San Francisco, they're all $1 million houses anyway. So,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
it is what it is. But in some of these markets, you want to think of like a max, like, oh, maybe it's 500,000 max or a 700,000 max or something like that. So,
And
so
I
that's
wondered
another.
too, like, you know, here, like Florida, it's good that you're in Florida because you'll understand this. You
So,
know, we have a senior population, right? And when I go into my tools for prospecting, because I get one through my title company, I get one through my brokerage, blah, 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 and I can use public records. What I have trouble finding, and I don't know if there's a way to do it, is like, hey, these are the properties owned by somebody that's over the age of 80, because those are people that are maybe not today, but eventually they'll be going into assisted living,
yeah.
right? And if they've been in that house for a long time or whatever, do you know if there's a way to pull that kind of a list and say, hey, these people are, working their way into that category
You
because they're
know,
80 and
I
above or 85?
So there's two ways to pull a list like that. Okay. One way is you actually have a provider that can pull based on age. Now that's kind of rare. Okay. I do know that
Yeah,
the
I
more,
don't have one.
right. And the more expensive ones can do that. Like I think this company called List Source, I think might be able to pull based on age and stuff like that. Um,
Hmm.
the other way is you can just play the numbers game and give me anyone who's owned this house for more than 20 years, right?
Yeah, right, right.
More than 30 years. So those are the two
Yeah, last
ways.
sale date I can do,
Yeah,
but
exactly.
because we have a lot of people that move here, like they may only have been in that house for 4 years. But
Mm,
now they have to go. You know what I mean? They moved from Michigan. I was doing an open house yesterday. The
that's a
guy
good
was
point.
88 and he came here 5 years ago from Chicago. So that's only, he was 83 at the time. Now he needs to sell his house and go in assisted living, but it wouldn't show up under, hey, he's owned the house more than 20 years category.
Right. Well, and that then I think to our next point is if we know where the older communities are, we do focus on 1 to 8 years too, right? Because I think
Oh,
that's a
yeah.
good point. Because someone could be, let's
So
say
like a
they're moving.
55 plus and
Exactly. Yeah, like,
yeah, yeah.
this is the fun part, right? It's like how do we get what we're looking for without having the company actually say this is exactly what you're looking for?
Right.
So to your point, if you think people are older, you know, you could do that. And I bet this is happening too. I bet it's too cold where they are and they're moving down there. And then to your point, they're like, oh, this will be so much better. And maybe it's not that much better, or maybe something happens to them. And then, you know, then they do need
Yeah.
to make the move, you know, to your point. Another thing might be to look at maybe equity too. You know,
Yeah.
sometimes more equity means more ownership, and older people also generally have more equity. Even if they did sell their previous house, they might pay down the equity on their next one. So I would use equity and sale dates as an attempt to qualify those two things.
Okay. And if I had you pull the records, you'd be able to do something like that then?
Yeah, yeah. Everything we just spoke about, we have those same performance criterias and stuff.
Okay, cool. Okay, what else would you like to go through?
I guess it's about it, which is actually perfect timing because my next call is actually starting right now. Um,
Okay,
there's this document we're looking at is actually in the invitation to this, just so you know. So if you have the
mhm,
calendar invite, you can take a look at this yourself. That'd be one thing. Another thing we could try to do that's low on expense is we could try texting 2,000 records. You know, we only charge $240 to text 2,000 people, and we go back and forth for you. I think that that would be, if we pick these same records, I think we should do that as a very inexpensive split test and see how that performs maybe before we do a whole nother full campaign, right? Um,
okay,
that just might be a piece of advice, but that would be the one thing I might recommend.
okay. And who could I talk to about pursuing some of these recommendations then? Is that
You could,
schedule another call with you, or is there another person I could talk to?
yeah, so it'd be one of two things. One, I've got my assistant in here taking notes
Oh,
uh,
okay,
with us. Um, and the other thing is, um, so she can do that. And two, if you just want to email us too and say, hey, Nick said he recommended texting that list of 2,000. Could you send an invoice for 2,000 text messages? You could also just email us and direct us along the way too.
okay. Because I'd want to work with you guys to do the pulling of the list so that I'd have, that kind of list. So, all right, yeah, if your assistant there can send me an email and I can get going with them and then we'll work it out together.
Okay, you got it. Thank you so much.
All right, thanks so much for your time.
Yeah, you're welcome. I'll see you, Lisa.
Alrighty.